Now release awareness into space in all directions, releasing all appearances, relaxing completely. Now bring your awareness right in upon itself, right into the experience of awareness. And focus, being aware of being aware. And again, releasing awareness into space, releasing all appearances, completely relaxing. And again, bringing awareness right in upon itself, right into the experience of awareness itself. And focus sharply. Simply allow the mind to come to rest. Being aware of being aware. Resting in luminously clear awareness. easy? No? Well, there's a few people saying yes.
Yeah. It was very simple, I think.
Exactly. It's very simple. It's so simple. That's why it's not easy. Because, like I said, we always want to do something. And so if we're the sort of person who's driven doing, we're probably going to find this very difficult because we've got to stop doing. But if we can manage to stop doing, it's so simple. So simple. And that's one of the benefits of this practice, is that it can get us out of the doing mode and we can just be. Of course, that doesn't mean we cut from everything in our life. It means, actually, we can be in that spacious, open stillness and effectively engage in the world without getting caught up in turbulence everywhere. So we can really be in that very open, spacious state and function perfectly well in daily life. As I mentioned already, many people find this very difficult for that reason, not because it's a complicated practice. But if you're drawn to it from the very beginning, you can use this as the shamatha practice. You don't have to start with the breath and then move to the mind and then go with the awareness. You can start right here and just use this as your shamatha practice. Perfectly okay. Any questions?
First of all, the word appearances, let go of appearances. What exactly do you mean by appearances?
Anything that comes up in the mind is an appearance.
Right. Anything,
Everything.
Everything is an appearance.
There's the mind and then the appearances to the mind.
Right.
So anything that appears is an appearance.
Right, okay.
So it's basically this practice is about, well, you have all the appearances of your mind, but you're just
Not paying any
paying
attention
attention to them, you're just being,
knowing that you're aware. That's it.
That's it, yeah.
That's it. That's all. Yeah.
Funny thing happened that I found myself having a conversation between the awareness and the awareness and the awareness of the awareness with the awareness.
Yeah.
And it helped me to be focused on the awareness, but it still can't do it. So.
Yeah. So I think in this one, there's, you know, of course, a little bit of commentary to know what to do can help, but in this practice, even a little bit of commentary is kicking us out of being because we're doing. So I think in general, to, of course, think about the instructions before the practice, but then when you actually get into the practice, just drop everything. Just drop everything and just be present. And if a thought and an appearance comes up, an appearance can be, you know, oh, I'm observing the awareness, then just ignore that thought. Just ignore it. Don't entertain it at all. Well, don't try and block it, but just pay no interest to it. No interest. And just be aware of being aware. That's it.
Sorry, when you get, it seems like there's two stages though. So if you get present, I can suddenly feel I'm present, and then I've got this thing that I've got to be aware that I'm present, and it seems to then take me out.
Well, so again, even the instruction, be aware of being aware,
Seems to.
I mean, the thing is, what we're talking about is being in this non-dualistic state. And to really describe that using language is impossible. So any words you use is dualistic. So even being aware of being aware has a little bit that flavour. So that's why maybe just be present. Because then there's no aware of aware, or being aware of aware. Because that's already somehow duality.
Yeah.
But again, it's hard to give instructions without doing that. And so, but yeah, if you be present works, use that. Just be.
Just presence.
Presence, anything. Presence. It's fine.
For example, when you have a be is be with everything that comes up. And for example, I had a sharp back in my pain. So my being was a sharp back in my pain. Then I was hot. So my being was being hot.
Yeah, but that's another practice. That's what's called open presence. That's being aware of everything that arises. That's not this practice. That's another practice.
But how can you, if you're supposed to be, just to be, and you're hot, and I'm hot, but I do not, I'm not clinging into it. Okay? How can you be without feeling hot if you're hot or cold or having pain or?
Because our awareness is selective. In the shamatha practice, it's always selective. In the breath practice, it was selecting. Out of all the appearances, it was selecting the sensations of the breath, ignoring all the others. In the mind practice, it was selecting the appearances, the mental events, and ignoring all the rest. In this practice, we're ignoring all appearances. We're being selective in ignoring all appearances. So we're being selective.
It's not about us. I wonder if you have, for example, when I had a pain.
Yeah.
Can I ignore the pain? Can you ignore pain? I mean, it's there. I can choose not to cling into it, but how can I ignore the pain?
Well, we do that a lot. If we're absorbed in a great program on TV and there's a bit of pain in the knee, we actually quite well ignore the pain because we're so interested in the program, aren't we? Of course, if the pain gets big, it pulls our attention, but unless it's big, because we're so interested in the program, we can quite well ignore everything. We can ignore the person talking to us, trying to get our attention. We can ignore the dog barking outside. We can ignore the phone going off because we're so intent on looking at the program on TV. In that sense.
I found that, okay, so I didn't concentrate on the breath and I didn't use it as an anchor, but it was it was there. It's like the one thing that's there, even.
And that's why we shouldn't keep swapping, because if our shamatha practice is the breath and we get the habit of focusing on the breath and then suddenly we switch to this, you're going to find, due to your habit, focusing on the breath.
Even habit, that makes us a lot. I mean, that's called being, breathing.
Well, I think generally when you're engaged in activities in daily life, you're not that focused on your breathing, are you? You're focused on the activity. So that's another reason why we shouldn't keep swapping, because we're going to find that if our shamatha practice is always focusing on the breath, and then suddenly we switch to the thing, probably out of habit we're going to find we're going back to the breath.
I found it very relaxing and very I didn't know if it was so relaxing if it's good. So.
Very good. In fact, that's another reason I think that this practice is so beneficial in a modern society, because we're so uptight and tense. And even the breath practice and the mind practice can, if we're not doing it right, can increase the tension. I have to focus on that breath, mind, focus. Whereas in this, complete relaxation. So in fact, what I find, and this, when I did the last longer retreat with Alan Wallace, a number of people were doing shamatha practice, doing the breath and mind. A lot of them moved to this practice because of this reason. Because they were getting too... Because if you go into shamatha practice retreat mode many hours each day, there can be a tendency with using the breath or even the mind to start to really push. I've got to take this opportunity. I've got to get somewhere, and we push, and then we get more tight, agitation, big mess. Whereas in this practice, that's hard to do. So actually a number of people switched to this practice midstream because of that and found great benefit. So another reason this practice is so beneficial in our modern society, because it's easy to relax. More easy than the other practices.
I felt like the breathing was almost stopping. I didn't need to breathe a lot.
That's right, because we're relaxed. The more relaxed you become, the less breath you need to nourish the body. The more agitated, the more air you need to produce the oxygen. Whereas the more you relax, exactly, the less you'll need to breathe.
So when do you choose to if you say not to swap, then when do you choose to use the breath? When do you choose to use the mind?
Again...
And when do you choose not to use
Yeah.
any object?
Again, the general recommendation is use the object that works best for you and stick with it. Stick with it the whole way to shamatha. The whole way. So if you like the breath, use that for the next X years, whatever you do to do this practice.
5,000 hours.
Or whatever. Just stay with the breath the whole time. Alan Wallace was suggesting we can do that. Or we can start with the mind from the beginning and do thousands of hours. We can start with the awareness and do thousands of hours. Or another option, possibility, is if we want to perhaps use the mind or awareness, but it doesn't work because our mind is too chaotic, then maybe for 1,000 hours we can do the breath and get to a level of stability and clarity. Then we can switch to one of these practices and continue for a long time. But to keep swapping each week or so.
Why not?
Why not what?
Why can't we in our daily exercise can have one meditation on the breath and one meditation on the...
Because we'll become the jack of all trades and the master of none. Because we don't have enough time on any one of those practices to become the master. Because we keep changing, swapping. That's why. I mean, we'll become good at all of them, but not efficient, not really. We won't get very far.
I still have a hard time with my eyes open.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's very common.
I tell you what the situation is that it's kind of adding a stimulation.
It's, sorry, what?
It's adding
Adding.
a stimulation and some visual image.
Exactly. So that's why I was suggesting when we go home to minimise that by not having lots of stuff, movement, have a blank wall, turn the light down, quite dark, or even use there's a particular thing for meditation called a mindfold, designed like a blindfold, but it's more comfortable, to block all light so it's completely black. And then you can have your eyes open. And then there's none of this.
Yeah, but why are you insisting on having the eyes open? Because when you close it, it's kind of, I feel a totally different sensation when I...
Exactly. And the reason was what I mentioned before, is a number of reasons. One is with the eyes closed, it's easy to go into dullness. It's harder to develop clarity. The second reason is that with the eyes closed, it's much easier to drift into the past and the future than with the eyes open. Also, with the eyes open, particularly with this mind and awareness practice, we're starting to break down this artificial false sense of duality. Because this Shamatha practice is the basis of Vipassana practice. So already in the Shamatha practice, if we're using the eyes open, we're already starting to break down this false sense of duality, which is helpful then when we go into Vipassana practice. And of course also, if we meditate with our eyes open, observing the mind, then it's much easier to do that in daily life because we have the habit of being able to observe the mind with the eyes open. If we only meditate with the eyes closed, observing the mind, maybe we get in the habit of observing the mind with the eyes closed, but then in daily life we don't have that habit with the eyes open. It's more difficult. So it's easier to transition into daily life. So for those reasons, it's very helpful to have the eyes open. Here, of course, the conditions are not ideal. And also, of course, if we're not used to it, then it's more stimulation. So that's why me, personally, when I meditate, eyes open at home, I have the room very dim. If there's a lot of light, I have one of these mindfolds, I put it on. Then it's completely black. Then there's nothing to pull the stim. And then you still have the eyes open, and you have that habit of meditating with the eyes open, you breaking down the sense of inner and outer, more clarity and so forth. So you can do that.
I think there's such a thing as wrong practice.
Wrong practice?
I mean, not everything is for everybody. Not everybody has to master everything.
No.
Like, for me, my meditation teacher tried to teach me this, and I was like, what the F do you, like, what do you want from me? I don't know how to do this. And like, it was really frustrating. It didn't bring me, like, and also, like, there's a problem with practicing outside of a tradition, because in Israel you have many practices available, Vipassana, and, you know, in the past I had hit many walls. Because practicing Vipassana without having loving kindness, and with that, like, there's a structure actually. You don't go into Vipassana right away, but
Correct.
now I know what you're talking about.
Sure.
Because
That's
I
right.
hit those walls, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a couple of comments. One, of course, is do we have to do this awareness practice? No. Do we have to do a shamatha practice? Do we have to develop a calm, clear, focused mind? Absolutely. What object we use, that's up to us, what works for us. So we don't have to do each one of these ones, but we need to do some sort of shamatha practice to develop a calm, clear, focused mind, that's for sure. Yeah. And then in terms of the other part, what you're saying is, yes, there are many different practices around, and they all have their benefits, and what people unfortunately often do is they go, oh, I like that one from there. Oh, that one's nice. That one's nice. That one's nice. Put it all together, mix it up, and it's a big mess.
So what's the structure? Like, what's the tradition? Can you tell me?
So, therefore, what I recommend is the great advantage of having many traditions is if there's only one and it didn't suit our personality, we were in trouble.
Yeah.
But because there's so many, we can look at each one and go, no, that one doesn't suit. No. Oh, that one looks like it resonates with me. I'll go there. So then shop around, but when you find a tradition that you feel is really resonates with you, go into it. Stay within it. Because that tradition, over probably a couple of hundred or thousands of years, have developed these practices to work together well, effectively. Because every tradition has its own perspective. And what you find is if you pick practices from different traditions, even though individually they may work, they actually may work against each other because of the perspective of that tradition. So therefore, it's important to stick within a tradition and do practices that fit together and work together.
Yeah, exactly. So in the Buddhist tradition, what's the recommendation? You know what I mean? Like practice loving kindness, or practice first shamatha, or practice vipassana? What do you do?
We're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to bring up that a little bit in the next session. Okay. But of course, what I talked about briefly, brief answer, and then we're going to do, actually I want to do we'll do another meditation shortly. All Buddhist traditions have three, you can boil it all down to three core practices. Ethics, concentration, which is this shamatha practice, and wisdom, or vipassana. But then often what we talk about is that the wisdom, we can talk about the two wings of the bird, wisdom and compassion. I mean, the sort of compassion comes in the ethics, but to really highlight the importance, then we can talk about wisdom and compassion. So these are the core elements of the practice. You know, we need the balance of wisdom and compassion on the basis of some sort of shamatha practice, on the basis of an ethical lifestyle. And then all Buddhist traditions fit within that, but then how they put it all together can be quite different. So therefore we can find a tradition that sort of seems to fit our disposition and personality, and also that tradition has some qualified teachers that can help as well. That's important too.
Teacher, because diving into vipassana at age 23 was like not such a good idea. I have to tell you, it was like, they tell you to acknowledge things, and then it's like anger. You just
sure. Yeah, that's right.
So maybe just find a teacher. I don't know.
Like that's going to be very helpful as well, of course. Okay. What I'd like to do is do another awareness practice. We're running short on time, so maybe we can reduce it a bit. But in this practice, what I'd like to do is start by just resting in awareness. So we won't observe the mind. We'll just prepare and rest in awareness. But then what I'd like to do is move a little bit into Vipassana mode in terms of starting to ask some questions about this awareness that we're resting in. So I'll just introduce a few questions towards the end, which is actually Vipassana practice, just to get a bit of a taste of what that might look like. And that's a bit more what we're going to be covering in 2 weeks' time. So I thought it'd be nice to just bring that in a little bit. So we'll do a short meditation, and then we'll, I think, take a break. begin by preparing the body, setting into a state of relaxation, stillness and vigilance. Allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. And setting the mind in a state of ease and relaxation. Allowing the mind to rest in the present moment through focusing on the sensations of the breath throughout the body.